On my 70th birthday, my daughter-in-law raised a toast to the man who never earned his place at this table. They all laughed. I smiled and agreed. But the next morning, I hadn't forgotten that laughter. I'm a 70-year-old man, retired civil engineer, married for 45 years, one son, no criminal record, no affairs, never laid a hand on anyone. I've been what most people would call boring, and I was fine with that. My wife Jessica and I worked hard, saved wisely, and raised our son Peter with every opportunity we could give him. Peter is 38 now, married to Samantha. They have two beautiful children, my only grandchildren, and live about 15 minutes away. We helped them buy their house. I mean, literally helped. My wife and I paid the down payment. We never asked for repayment. We just wanted them to be secure. Samantha, well, she's never liked me. I used to think it was just personality differences, you know? She's loud, assertive, opinionated. I'm quiet, a little reserved. She grew up in a wealthier family and sometimes drops comments about old-fashioned men, or how I don't really understand how hard it is to raise a modern family. I let it slide. I let a lot of things slide. Fast forward to my 70th birthday last month. My wife threw me a small dinner at our house. Just family. The grandkids made me cards, Peter grilled steaks in the backyard, and Samantha brought wine and a cake from a very expensive bakery. Halfway through dinner, after the kids were off playing in the living room, Samantha stood up with a glass in her hand and said she wanted to make a toast. I thought maybe it was a thank you, or something sentimental. She smiled, that kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes, and said, "To William, the man who never earned his place at this table, but always managed to sit at the head of it." There was a pause, a beat of silence. Then Peter laughed. Then everyone else joined in. Not belly laughs, the kind of uncomfortable chuckles that fill a room when no one wants to be the one who says, "That was too far." I smiled. I raised my glass. I even said, "Fair enough." But inside, something shifted. Something cracked. I didn't sleep much that night. I just kept hearing the laughter. Seeing Peter's face, how he looked at her, not me. I thought it was just a bad joke. But the next morning, I found something in the garage that made me realize it was much, much worse than a joke. The next morning, I got up early. Didn't really sleep much anyway. My wife was still in bed, so I made coffee and wandered into the garage to grab a light bulb for the hallway. While I was there, I noticed a large cardboard box shoved behind the water heater. It was taped shut, but not particularly well, like someone had hidden it in a hurry. We don't usually store anything back there, and I just cleared that area last month. Curious, I pulled it out. Inside were stacks of papers, folders, old mail, printed documents. Some of it was clearly ours, bank statements, tax returns, even old receipts from the 90s. But mixed in were things I definitely hadn't seen before. That's when I found the first envelope. It was addressed to Peter Carr, my son, but the sender wasn't a bank or a company. It was from a law firm. I opened it. It was a financial statement from 6 months ago showing a wire transfer of 420,000 Israeli new shekels, about 110,000 US dollars, into a joint account under his and Samantha's names. That didn't make sense. Peter doesn't make that kind of money, and we hadn't given them anything recently. I kept digging. There were multiple letters from the same law firm. Some referenced a trust revision, and others mentioned updated beneficiaries. Then I found one document that made my stomach drop. It was a revised draft of our living trust. My wife and I had set it up years ago. Peter was always the primary heir, with some small charitable donations included. But this version looked completely different. The assets were being redistributed into new subtrusts. One was named Carr Family Legacy Trust, with Peter and Samantha as co-trustees. Another had my wife's name on it. Mine was barely mentioned. The document wasn't signed yet, but someone had been preparing to change everything. I stood there in the cold garage, hands trembling, staring at legal paperwork I hadn't authorized, showing massive financial changes and hinting at betrayal from the one person I thought would never cross that line. Suddenly, the toast from last night didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a message, a warning, and I was already too late. That same morning, still holding the documents, I walked back into the house like I was sleepwalking. I didn't wake Jessica. I needed time to process. I kept thinking maybe, just maybe, there was some innocent explanation. Maybe Peter had been trying to surprise us with something. Maybe this was a legal mix-up. Maybe we had authorized something and just forgotten. But deep down, I knew better. Later that afternoon, I asked Peter to stop by, said I had an old drill I wanted him to borrow. Just casual. I didn't want to spook him. He showed up alone. Same easygoing smile he always wore when he wanted something. We sat in the garage. I had the folder next to me on the bench. He didn't seem to notice, or pretended not to. I started slow. Hey, I said. Quick question. Have you been talking to anyone about the trust lately? His body didn't react, but his voice tightened, just a fraction. Not really. Why? Just found something weird, I said. Then I opened the folder, flipped to the most recent draft, and handed it to him without a word. He looked at it, blinked, then put on the most artificial frown I've ever seen. Oh wow, he said. I didn't know you guys were revising it again. We weren't. A beat. He cleared his throat. Well, maybe Mom was. I mean, I'm not sure how this got here. Samantha might have. Samantha what? Accessed our legal records? Altered a trust document without our consent? That hit a nerve. His expression twitched. He tried to recover. Okay, look, Dad. It's not what you think. We were just looking into options. You and Mom are getting older. I cut him off. And that gives you the right to reassign our money? Peter stood up. You're overreacting. You don't even know what you're looking at. I know exactly what I'm looking at. He scoffed. Fine. Then maybe you should talk to Mom. Because she was the one who brought it up in the first place. That stopped me cold. Jessica? He must have seen the look on my face. That's when he smiled. Not kindly. Yeah, he said. Ask her. Then he grabbed the folder, handed it back roughly, and walked out. I sat there in silence, listening to the garage door creak shut behind him. Jessica had never mentioned anything like this. We did everything together. Every decision. Every account. Every legal step. But now I wasn't sure if I even knew who was on my side. I didn't ask Jessica right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't ready for the answer. For 2 days, I pretended things were normal. I made coffee, watered the plants, watched the news beside her in the morning like we always did. But inside, I was watching her. Not in a paranoid way, just differently. Looking for cracks. For hesitation. And I found them. She seemed distracted. On edge. She didn't ask about the garage. Didn't mention Peter's visit. Kept checking her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. It was after dinner, and we were clearing the table. The grandkids had come over earlier, but they'd already gone home. It was just the two of us, standing over the sink. I said quietly, Jessica, were you planning to change the trust? She froze mid-reach for a dish. Slowly set it down. Then, very calmly, she said, where is this coming from? From Peter, and the documents I found in the garage. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it. The flicker of fear. But it passed too fast, replaced by something flatter, colder. I wasn't planning anything, she said. Peter just suggested we talk to someone. He said it might be time to modernize things. That's all. Modernize things? I asked, voice shaking. Behind my back? With Samantha's name all over new trust documents? Jessica's jaw clenched. You always think the worst of her. This has nothing to do with my opinion of Samantha. This has to do with you. Did you authorize these changes? Silence. I didn't sign anything, she finally said. But yes, I spoke to the lawyer. I felt like the air had been pulled out of the room. Why wouldn't you tell me? I whispered. Her eyes were wet now. Because I knew you'd react like this. I stepped back. Like what? Like someone who's just found out his wife and son are planning to gut the legacy he spent 40 years building? She didn't answer. Just turned back to the sink. That was worse than shouting. Worse than excuses. Worse than any fight we'd ever had. She had nothing left to say. And suddenly, I realized they had already decided what they thought I was worth. And I wasn't even part of the conversation. That night, I sat in my study alone. Same leather chair I've used for years. Same view out the back window. Same sound of the clock ticking over the bookshelf. But everything felt different. I wasn't just betrayed. I was repositioned. Not as a father. Not as a husband. But as an asset. I started replaying things. Small moments that now felt loaded. The way Peter had started asking casual questions last year about the house deed. The times Samantha would joke about us downsizing and how the next generation should start making the calls. Even Jessica, she had started pulling back from conversations about money. Always said, "We'll deal with that later." But later had already been scheduled, and I wasn't invited. It made me wonder, had I been naive all these years? Had I mistaken peace for respect? The next day, I quietly made some phone calls. Not to confront. Not yet. Just to learn. I called our original estate attorney, Margaret Summers. We'd used her firm for years, though she was semi-retired now. I trusted her more than anyone. When I told her what I'd found, she asked for a scan of the documents. I emailed everything. 10 minutes later, she called back. Her voice was calm, but there was tension underneath. "William," she said, "these drafts were created by a different firm, not ours. Whoever made these had access to previous versions, but none of this went through me. And you're listed as grantor, but you're not copied on any correspondence. That's troubling." I asked her what it meant legally. She sighed. "If those changes get signed and filed, they could override your current trust, especially if there's pressure on Jessica to authorize them alone. It's not fraud yet, but it's a hair away." I felt my stomach twist. "They were hoping I'd die quietly," I said. She didn't deny it. Instead, she said, "You need to come in. Immediately." I hung up, walked back into the living room, and looked at my wife sitting calmly on the couch. I realized then I wasn't part of her future. I was a piece to be moved, a complication to be managed, and I wasn't going to let them manage me into silence. 2 days later, I met with Margaret in her small office downtown. She'd come out of semi-retirement specifically for this. That should have made me feel grateful, but honestly, it just made everything feel more real. She had already prepared a set of emergency documents, a reaffirmation of the original trust, a restatement of my medical and financial power of attorney, and, most significantly, an amendment to the will. Everything was clear and simple. My wife and I would retain joint authority over all changes. No one could be added or removed without both signatures. And if either of us were found to be acting under undue influence, the entire amendment would be void. I signed everything with a steady hand, but my heart was racing the entire time. Margaret watched me, quiet but firm. "There's one more thing I'd recommend," she said. "Separate legal counsel for Jessica. If she's being manipulated or pressured, she needs representation. If she's complicit, well, you'll need yours." That word, complicit, it kept ringing in my ears. Back home, Jessica barely looked up when I walked in. We were sharing a house, sharing meals, but we weren't sharing a life anymore. Still, I needed to know. I needed clarity. That night after dinner, I sat her down and said gently, "I met with Margaret." She flinched, barely noticeable, but I saw it. "She told me what's happening," I said, "and I've signed the necessary protections. The trust can't be changed behind my back again." Jessica didn't say anything. She just sat there, frozen. I leaned in. "If you're being pressured by Peter or Samantha, I can help. But I need you to be honest with me." Still silence. Then she whispered, "You don't understand how much they need this." I blinked. "They?" She looked up at me. "Peter's business is failing. They're drowning in debt. Samantha thought if we restructured the assets, it could shield some of the losses. They promised it was temporary. Just a technical workaround. A workaround that cuts me out of my own legacy?" I asked. "That hides assets I earned, using my name?" Jessica's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't sure they were from guilt. They said it was either this or bankruptcy, and I didn't want our grandchildren to suffer. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't about family. It was about leverage. They'd used the kids. They'd used her. And they were hoping I'd be too soft, too sentimental, to push back. They were wrong. The next morning, I made the call. I told Peter to come over with Samantha. Said we needed to clear the air. I didn't mention lawyers, trusts, or the paperwork. I wanted them off guard. Not prepared, not rehearsed. They showed up that evening. Samantha was dressed like she was heading to a board meeting. Heels, blazer, full makeup. Peter looked tired. Guilty, even. That gave me no comfort. We sat in the living room. I had Jessica on the couch beside me, silent. Not hostile, but distant, like she knew she was out of moves, but didn't know how to step back. I started calmly. I know what you've been doing. Peter frowned. Samantha blinked. Excuse me, she said. No need to play dumb, I said. I found the draft revisions. I spoke to Margaret. The trust, the wire transfers, the shell companies. All of it. Peter turned red. Dad, it's not what you think. Don't insult me. I snapped. You were trying to restructure our finances without my consent. You created legal documents behind my back. You lied. Samantha leaned forward. It was never about stealing anything. We were trying to protect family assets. Your trust structure was outdated and vulnerable. Don't you dare spin this as noble, I said, voice rising. You wrote me out of my own estate. Jessica was silent, eyes on the carpet. Peter exhaled through his nose like a child caught in a lie. We were going to tell you eventually. When? I asked. After the ink dried? After I died? Samantha's expression hardened. You're acting paranoid. I stood. Calmly. Slowly. I've reinstated legal protections. Everything's frozen. You have no power over any trust or asset connected to this family. Peter looked stunned. Samantha didn't flinch. This isn't about money, I added. It's about trust. And you broke it. Peter looked at his mother. You said he'd understand. Jessica looked away. That's when I knew. I'd been outnumbered in my own house for longer than I realized. But not anymore. I'm updating the will, I said. Effective immediately. Until further notice, you're no longer beneficiaries. Samantha's mask cracked. What about the kids? I'll take care of them, I said. Directly. Legally. But you? You've made your position clear. Peter stood up, hands clenched. You're overreacting. No, I said. I'm responding. They left. Jessica didn't speak for the rest of the night. And I didn't ask her to. The house felt different after they left. Not quieter, just emptier. Jessica went upstairs without a word. I stayed in the kitchen, sitting in the same chair where I used to help Peter with math homework. Funny how memories change color when you see people for who they really are. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I found a message on my phone. From Peter. Just one line. You're really going to throw away your family over paperwork? I didn't respond. An hour later, Samantha called Jessica. I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I caught fragments. Words like humiliated, overreaction, doesn't understand modern estate planning. Modern estate planning? Is that what we're calling betrayal now? By noon, the tone shifted. Peter texted again, this time with a smiley face. We've all said things we didn't mean. Let's sit down and work this out like adults. Manipulation in a prettier box. Classic Samantha. Classic Peter, now too. I called Margaret again. I told her everything. She calmly asked, do you feel safe leaving the trust in Jessica's control? It hurt, but I answered truthfully. No, not anymore. She didn't say I told you so. Instead, she walked me through the next steps. A temporary freeze on shared decision-making. Power of attorney limited to individual scope. And most painful of all, initiating separation of estate within the marriage. That meant some hard conversations with Jessica. But before that, I needed to send a message. I wrote a letter to Peter and Samantha. Not a legal notice, just a statement of fact. I told them they were no longer listed as primary beneficiaries. That all access to shared financial tools had been revoked. That the inheritance, should it return to them in any form, would bypass them directly and go into a protected custodial account for the grandkids. No more blind faith. No more shared family planning. They wanted a legacy they didn't earn. Now they'd feel the weight of what they tried to take. That night, Jessica finally spoke. She came into my study, a room she hadn't stepped foot in for weeks. No wine in hand, no practiced calm. Just her. And for once, she looked small. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. I didn't look up. That's the problem. You didn't think it was going far. Because you weren't the one being cut out. She sat down across from me. Her hands trembled in her lap. I just wanted to help them. Peter was spiraling. Samantha said the trust could be restructured to protect what's left of their business. I finally looked at her. And you believed her? Jessica didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, I believed our son. That stung. Not because I wanted her to stop loving Peter, but because I wasn't even part of the calculation anymore. Did you ever plan to tell me? I asked. She hesitated. I thought if it worked out, if it stabilized everything, maybe you wouldn't have to know. Do you hear yourself? I said, stunned. You were willing to gamble everything we built on the hope that I'd be too blind or too dead to notice. Her eyes welled with tears. I thought I was helping. I didn't see it as betrayal, but it was. I stood up, walked to the window, took a deep breath. I don't know if I can trust you again, I said quietly. Not after this. Jessica didn't cry. She just nodded. I understand. Then she stood and left. She didn't slam the door. She didn't beg. And that was the worst part. It wasn't just the trust with Peter and Samantha that had crumbled. It was ours. A few days passed. The house was silent. Jessica and I moved around each other like shadows, sharing space, but not warmth. I needed fresh air. I walked the block, ended up chatting with Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor across the street. Widowed, retired teacher, knows everything that happens on this street before it hits the mailbox. She looked at me kindly and said, William, I've been meaning to ask, is everything all right? I saw your daughter-in-law parked out front a few weeks ago late. Looked like she had a key. I froze. Samantha? She nodded. Middle of the night. I thought maybe she was checking on you too. But then she walked out with a box. My stomach dropped. I asked her what kind of box. She gestured with her hands. Medium. Cardboard. Taped. She tossed it in her trunk and drove off. Didn't even knock. That was before my birthday. Before the toast. I thanked her, tried to keep my expression neutral, and went straight home. Jessica was in the kitchen. I didn't ask this time. I accused. Did you give Samantha a key? She froze. What? I stepped forward. Answer the question. Did you give her a key to this house? A long pause. Then, she said she wanted to drop off something for your birthday. I was asleep. She asked for the key code. I didn't think it was a big deal. Jessica, she stole documents. She went through our private files. That box I found. She took the first one. Jessica sat down like her legs gave out. I didn't know. I stared at her. You didn't ask. I walked into my office. Sure enough, there were gaps in the files. Printouts missing. Copies gone. She'd taken only what she needed. That toast on my birthday? It wasn't a joke. It was a celebration. A quiet, smug victory speech. And we hadn't even known we'd already lost. The next morning, I called Margaret again. My voice must have sounded different, because she asked, what happened, before I even explained. I told her about the late-night break-in, the missing files, the key code Jessica had given out without blinking. Her tone shifted. Calm, but firmer now. William, we're well past miscommunication. This is unauthorized access. Potential theft. If she used those documents to prepare fraudulent filings, we need to act fast. Is it criminal? I asked. It could be, she replied. Especially if they attempted to alter or forge trust paperwork using private financial data. And since they weren't beneficiaries yet, there's no claim of shared entitlement. I asked what we could do. She outlined the next steps. File an incident report with the police. Draft a cease and desist letter, formally notifying Peter and Samantha of unauthorized access and intent to pursue legal remedies if repeated. Temporarily revoke all key codes and rekey the house. File an affidavit reaffirming mental capacity and control over estate decisions, just in case they try to claim otherwise later. It was overwhelming, but I agreed to everything. By noon, we'd changed the locks. By 2 p.m., I filed the report. By dinner, Peter had already sent a message. What the hell, Dad? Did you really go to the police? Over paperwork? I didn't respond. Margaret advised, let everything go through legal channels now. No more family discussions. No more middle ground. Jessica sat quietly while I signed the formal notices. She looked pale. I asked her, are you still protecting them? She shook her head. Not anymore. Then you need to testify if this escalates, I said. You gave them the code. You let them in. That matters. She nodded, but I could tell the weight of it was sinking in. The weight of what she'd allowed, of who she'd chosen to believe, and the home we'd built together. It was no longer neutral ground. It was a crime scene. 3 days after filing the report, Samantha showed up, unannounced. No call, No text. Just rang the doorbell at 9 a.m., like nothing had happened. I didn't open the door. I watched her through the security camera. She knocked again, then started yelling through the door. Are you serious, William? You called the cops on your own family? Over documents? I stayed silent. She wasn't finished. This is abuse. Financial abuse. You're trying to erase your son. That line, it stuck. Not protecting my family. Not responding to betrayal. In her mind, I was the abuser for daring to lock the doors. For daring to keep my own money under my name. Eventually, I picked up the intercom. Calm voice. Legal tone. Samantha, you are trespassing. You've been served with a cease and desist. This property is under legal protection. If you don't leave immediately, I will call Officer Reeves. She paused. That name meant something. He was the one who took the report. She spat something I won't repeat and stormed off. 15 minutes later, Peter texted. You're destroying everything. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply. Instead, I contacted Margaret. We finalized a formal restraining order, limited in scope, but enforceable. Samantha was no longer allowed on our property or to contact me directly. Jessica signed it too. Her hands were shaking. She didn't say much that night, but she did quietly ask, do you think they'll come back? I answered truthfully, not in the way we remember them, because this wasn't a family falling apart over words. This was a slow-motion ambush, dressed in birthday cake and toasts. And now that the ambush failed, they were starting to show their real faces. It didn't take long for the rest of the family to find out. A cousin texted me out of the blue. Hey, Uncle William, what's going on with Peter and Sam? Heard there was a restraining order? That's when I realized they were already rewriting the story. Peter and Samantha had gone into damage control mode. Quiet calls, group chat hints, little drops of concern and confusion about my health, my memory, my judgment. One of Jessica's sisters called her in tears. Why is Will attacking his own son? You always said he was the most generous man alive. What changed? Jessica didn't defend me. She didn't attack me either. She just said, it's complicated. But here's the thing. When betrayal happens inside a family, no one wants to believe it. It's easier to pretend you're watching a misunderstanding than admit someone you love chose money over loyalty. That weekend, I got a message from Samantha's father, a man who never liked me but always played nice at holidays. William, I'm disappointed. There's still time to undo this. Think of your grandchildren. Think of them. They were the only reason I was fighting this. That's when I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I drafted a personal statement and sent it to the entire extended family. No drama, no accusations, just the facts. I outlined the unauthorized trust drafts, the late-night entry, the missing documents, the police report, and the restraining order. I ended it with this. If you choose to believe their version, I won't try to stop you. But I won't allow silence to become complicity. This was not about miscommunication. This was premeditated. I will protect my legacy and myself, even if it means standing alone. Some didn't reply. Some offered quiet support. One niece said, I always knew something was off about Samantha. But the most surprising message came from my grandson, 14 years old. Grandpa, I'm sorry. I hope one day they tell the truth. That was the first time I cried. Because maybe the next generation was still watching. And maybe it wasn't too late to protect them after all. The legal side settled faster than I expected. Margaret filed everything efficiently. The updated trust, the will revision, the protective measures. All signed, notarized, locked. A legal firewall between me and anyone trying to siphon what I'd spent a lifetime earning. Jessica and I, meanwhile, started living like polite strangers. We shared meals in silence. She took calls in the guest room now. There was no screaming, no slamming doors, just the soft ache of two people who'd stopped protecting each other. Still, I didn't ask her to leave. Not yet. Instead, I focused on one final act of control. I created a separate custodial fund for my two grandchildren. Not a promise, not a future clause, a fully funded, independent account, held in trust under the name of a third-party fiduciary. Peter and Samantha would never touch it. If I passed tomorrow, that money would go to my grandchildren directly when they turned 25 for education, health, or housing. Nothing else. I didn't tell Peter. I didn't tell Jessica. I sent a letter to the fiduciary and copied Margaret. That was the last financial gift I ever gave my son's household. Later that week, I got one final letter, certified mail, from Samantha's attorney. It was a veiled threat dressed as a request for resolution. They claimed I had created emotional distress and financial confusion by excluding Peter from decisions regarding family equity. I forwarded it to Margaret. Her reply was short. Empty threat. They know they've lost. They're just trying to shake the tree one more time. And I didn't shake. I didn't reply, because sometimes silence is the final word. It's been a month since I changed the locks, filed the documents, and started sleeping with both eyes closed again. Jessica moved into the guest room permanently last week. We haven't talked about separation, but we both know this marriage will never return to what it was. I loved her for over 4 decades, but love without trust is just habit. Peter hasn't called. Samantha posted a photo on social media of the kids with the caption, "Some people only show up when it's too late." I didn't respond. I visit my grandkids through a supervised third party now, a mediator who specializes in fractured families. It's sterile, sure, but it's peaceful, and the kids still smile when they see me. That's enough. What have I learned? First, betrayal doesn't always arrive like a thunderclap. Sometimes it comes in the form of a smile at your birthday table, a toast wrapped in mockery, a late-night file cabinet quietly emptied. Second, estate planning isn't just paperwork. It's a boundary. If you don't defend it, someone will redraw the lines while you're not looking. Third, family is sacred, but not all family is safe. If you're reading this because something feels off in your own circle, listen to that voice. Check the files. Ask the hard questions. And when you get your answers, believe them. Because what they laugh about today, they may already be planning tomorrow. And if you wait too long to act, you may find yourself applauding at your own erasure. I smiled when Samantha gave that toast. I smiled because I thought it was a joke. But the next morning, I realized I was the only one who thought that. And I haven't smiled at her since.